generations, the eastern shore of Delmarva has laid claim to the scariest of folklore, unexplained occurrences, ghostly experiences, and spine-tingling tales from beyond. Do you believe?
Do you believe?
Do you believe?
What or who might lie beyond your perception of reality?
One of the guests was complaining about a smell in room 16. So I went up to the room, shut the door behind me, and was smelling around, couldn't smell anything. So I decided I was going to leave then, when all of a sudden, the latch on the door was locked. And I kept pulling and pulling and pulling, nothing was happening. And I started to panic. How was I gonna get out? All of a sudden, I took a step back, took a deep breath in, and the latch on the door clicked all by itself. And it slowly opened, and I quickly pulled the handle down and ran out of that room and haven't been in room 16 since. I was sitting at the front desk, and all of a sudden I hear it clinking, and I looked over, and there's the 3 crystals on the lamp just started to briefly touch one another. And it's the same 3 crystals that will go every single time.
Our housekeeping department is a little surprised every time they walk in number 18. It seems that the furniture gets moved around occasionally, but the one thing in the room that moves more than anything is our angel. There's times when we walk in and she's right where she's supposed to be, to the left of the door. And then sometimes she moves over by the gold chair in the armoire. Other times we come in and find her by the window. And we've even come in and found her in the bathroom at some point. But the chairs frequently get moved around, and the books on the table by the bed and on the side by the chairs are occasionally moved. Just recently we had a family here. They wanted room 18, and we were, of course, happy to have them occupy this room as it's one of our nicest rooms in the hotel. But the family came downstairs shortly after they checked in and said, "Could we please be moved to another room?" And of course we were curious as to what could be wrong with the room, and we found out they were taking photographs in the room, and there seemed to be a distraction, a little light dancing across the room. And I said right away, well, perhaps it's the sun. But then we realized the sun was on the other side of the hotel. There was actually something in the photograph. They were taking pictures of the family, and there was an additional figure in the photograph. One of the very fascinating stories about the hotel came to us from a front desk person. She was here on a very cold winter evening by herself. There were no occupants in the hotel. And as it turned out, she was sitting there, and all of a sudden she heard this terrible noise and a terrible rumbling above her. And she was curious about it, but a little frightened to come up. And it was sounding like furniture was being dragged from one end of the hallway to the other. But she came upstairs and she looked everywhere. She looked in the ladies' parlor. She looked all up and down the halls and the small hallways going off of the main hall and could find nothing. She went back downstairs. She was reading, and all of a sudden this terrible noise started again, even louder. And this time she was a little more than frightened to come up. But finally she decided she had to come up and see what was happening. And when she came upstairs again, she looked everywhere, and it was the hallway right outside of the ladies' parlor. And she was looking from one end of the hall to the other, could find nothing. She went back downstairs, but later, after telling the story many times, she finally found out that there was a little girl who lived in the hotel. And this little girl used to ride her tricycle up and down the hall. At that time, the hall had no carpeting on it, so this would have been a little bit noisy when she was riding up and down.
Time after time, people come in the museum and want to go through, and every time they come in and go through, there's a different story. Some see ghosts, others feel coldness in the air when they get in the boat room. And so the first story I'd like to tell you is the one about the little boy. Richard and I were here, and it was almost closing time. And in comes this little boy, and he was about 5 years old, looked like he'd just gotten out of the barber shop. His hair was cut and combed smooth. His eyes were as blue as could be, and he had a green shirt on. I'll never forget it as long as I live. So Richard and I stood there, and it was about time for us to close, but we thought, no, we're going to wait a while because we don't want to leave that little boy in here. But I thought, sure, a mama or a daddy or an aunt or uncle, somebody would come and look for him. But no one ever came. So we decided Richard went hunting. He went in all the closets and all the stairways and in the boat in here, and the little boy was not to be had.
The door flies open. This little kid comes running in, and I'm saying, there's nobody behind him. I walk around, I go in the bathroom, he's not there. The kitchen, he's not there. The fish room, he's not there. I go upstairs. There's no child, there's nobody here. So we figured the parents will eventually come here. Nothing. So it was a silly thing. I never seen anybody move that fast.
But we never could find his mom or daddy. So I guess he found somewhere in here to go with the other ghost. They decided to paint the steps to the attic. So they went up and they painted them, and that's where they kept all the supplies for the museum. And when they went up, after the paint had dried, there was a little footprint on the top step. This guy came in one day, and he had been in the museum, and he came back out and he said, I work in Kuwait and I come back every month. And would you like for me to bring some sand from over there back to you next month when I come home? I said, well, of course, we'd appreciate it. So he goes, and I never thought any more about it, but next month here he comes with a little bag of sand and his mother. He said, well, do you mind if I take my mother in and show her the sand display? I said, no, of course, be our guest. So when they came in and looked at the sand display, I guess they decided to step on in here and look at this life car. So when she looked in the life car, she saw a man in there in a black slicker, soaking wet, and her son said she was petrified, crying, and ran out of here as fast as she could. And he said, my mother will never be back here again.
The Laughing Sal was at the Jester's Fun House for many years on the boardwalk at Worcester Street. She was there from the 1920s up through the 60s. There's been many a time where when we're closed in the off season and there's no visitors here anyway, we're here by ourselves working, she'll just start laughing, and there's obviously no one here to push the button.
Selbyville, where Route 54 joins Route 113, is the nearest town to the Great Cypress Swamp, or Burnt Swamp, so called because of the fire that repeatedly ravaged it. More famously, the swamp is, or at least was, home to Delmarva's own Bigfoot, the Selbyville Swamp Monster. It's 1920. A couple coon hunters are out with their dogs in the moonlight. It is said they hear something scream, and this horrible noise started coming toward them. Something large and heavy continued to follow them, snapping through the branches as it came. Fast forward to 2011. Two teenage boys on vacation near the Transpeninsular Line ventured out on a late-night bike ride down by the waterfront.
We heard some rustling in the marsh area as we rode to the wetlands.
It was kind of scary. There were no cars, bikes, or people anywhere, just darkness and that sound.
We decided to get out of there. It was really freaking us out. We heard the huffing and panting in the gravel beneath its feet.
It got louder and closer as we pedaled as fast as we could to get past it. It sounded like it was chasing us. We didn't stop to look. As we rode back out the same path, we heard a low, growling, moaning sound with louder rustling and the sounds of snapping branches and footsteps coming right at us.
Man, that creature was chasing us.
I'm not going back there.
The boys or the hunters never actually saw the Selbyville swamp monster, although stories of mangled small game and dogs were often found in the area of the sightings. There are many in town who still believe a creature roams the woods of the burnt swamp.
For generations, the eastern shore of Delmarva has laid claim to the scariest of folklore, unexplained occurrences, ghostly experiences, and spine-tingling tales from beyond. Do you believe?
Do you believe?
Do you believe?
What or who might lie beyond your perception?